So that's why I'm starting this business. I was working in tech before this. I was making good money. I had a nice BMW. I had a nice house in the suburbs. I got laid off 3 times in 1 year and couldn't keep paying the bills. And that's why I started focusing on this. I had this moment of what are you going to make your life into? And this is the direction I wanted to go. So I get to rebuild. Like I get to go back and fix the glitches in my thinking and really rebuild the life I want.
Hi, and welcome to the Ronin Mindset podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and this podcast is your resource if you are looking to get out and live abroad, ditch the 9 to 5 grind, escape the matrix, and live life free. You're in the right spot. And today's guest is going to have some very interesting insights for you. Jeff Kolez is building a business around helping men recover from divorce and build an amazing life. He's been around the world diving the most beautiful spots imaginable: Belize, Yucatan, Australia, just to name a few. Plus, he spent a few years in Germany as well. His style of travel is more of a slow matting, and he feels that in order to build a business, especially a conscious one that focuses on deep change, that requires a lot of introspection and hard questions. And you really don't get that kind of reflection in the suburbs. So, Jeff Kolez, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Great introduction.
Well, I had a little help. So, how are you doing, man?
Good. I'm awesome. How about you?
Really good, really good. And where are you right now?
Right now we're in Ensenada, Mexico.
Okay.
We started off in Playa del Carmen, spent about a year, a little less than a year there, but my wife got tired of the heat. So it's pretty, and I think spending the summer there was pretty brutal. I think it hit 40 degrees Celsius some days and it was just too much. So this is her choice. We're in Ensenada. It's much cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, Playa, especially in July and August, is rough. I spent years in Playa del Carmen, and the humidity is what got me.
It's brutal.
It,
Brutal,
it
brutal,
is
brutal.
rough.
We would
It
walk the
is
dogs
rough.
in the morning and just come back and we'd have to change.
Yeah. And when you get in the shower and you come out, you can't dry off. That humidity is next level. But, for most of the year, it's pretty decent, I think.
I found there was, I don't know if I should give this away. Part of the problem with Playa we found was for part of the year, and I would say it starts, I want to say November, but you would get sargassum, which is like this seaweed up on the shore. And it would stink. You could smell it from our apartment. We were like 4 or 5 blocks away from the ocean.
Uh,
I found there was this sweet spot of about a month in April where you didn't have any tourists and you didn't have any sargassum, and the weather was reasonably cold. So if you can, go in April, and there's nobody there.
yeah, that's the thing. There's just nobody there. It's just kind of sad with that whole the sargasso, the seaweed stuff, because when I first moved to Playa, I got there in 2013.
Hmm.
Didn't exist. That didn't happen until 2016, maybe, I think, was when it first showed up. Before that, the beaches were always pristine and clean. You never had the seaweed, you never had that smell.
Yeah.
And there were some years it's been really bad.
Yeah, I don't know how bad this year was, but we lived near the dog beach on 72nd, and they would
Oh,
clean that up every day. Like there were just tons of people there raking it up. So we were lucky in that aspect. But still, you go in the water and it's floating there. It's kind of gross.
yeah. Yeah, it's gross. And when it first showed up, they didn't have anything in place to mitigate it. So it just built up and built up. There were, what is that, probably like the beach and about 14th or 16th Street where it comes in and they have those boats moored out there. It
Hmm.
was building up. It was literally like 4 feet deep on the beach and it just stunk. It
Yep.
was horrible. At least now they've got the people in place to try and go out there and clean it up every morning. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
but
was
what do
rough.
they do with it? There was in different spots there were mountains of it. There was this spot we used to walk down to the beach. It was like this little kind of like an alleyway, and it would go down to the beach. But on one side of it, they piled the sargassum, and it was maybe like 20, 30 feet tall.
Ooh.
And ooh, did it stink! And there were tons of flies.
Yeah, that's rough. It's gotta hurt Playa, I would imagine, because that's kind of the beaches used to be so amazing there.
Yeah.
Not a hint of it. And for me, honestly, that's kind of partially soured me a little bit on Playa del Carmen. just that.
Yep.
But there are also a lot of places around there. Like if you go to Isla Mujeres, you never see any sargasso there or stuff like
I
that.
thought
There's
on the Cozumel on the west side it would be doesn't get it. But I think on the east side gets it just as bad as Playa. And I think Isla
yeah,
Mujeres is the same. It would be
yeah.
the side with the ocean. But if you go on I'm struggling to remember the orientation of Isla Mujeres. But I think it's north-south, isn't it?
It is more or less. Playa Norte is up, but it is kind of facing westward, more or less, because you can watch the sunset there. So you don't get any of that on that beach up
Okay.
there, which is really cool. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I ended up falling in love with Asia anyway, so I think that's where I'm heading back to.
I haven't made it out there. I need to do that at some point.
I absolutely love it. I'm also one of those guys who I've been a decent amount of places, but I'm still at my age, I have never found a place that I was just like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to stay.
Mm.
I just haven't found that. I think it's going to be somewhere in Southeast Asia if I'm not, because I really vibe with that area, but I haven't explored enough of it. There's so much there. So I don't know.
Which part
Maybe
of Southeast Asia?
I really like Thailand. I love Vietnam. Philippines is amazing, but I didn't see again, like the Philippines, for example, is so huge. I spent a month there, but most of it around Manila.
Hmm.
I didn't make it out to a lot of the beach places. I didn't check out Cebu City. There's just so many places that I didn't get. So it's tough to make a judgment call on that.
You have the opportunity to travel more. Go check it out. It's an
Exactly.
excuse, right?
Exactly. I've got to find it. I've got to find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, tell me about the business that you're building on the road. It's based around helping divorced men recover from that, correct?
Exactly. About, I guess, 13 years ago, I went through a miserable divorce. And actually, that was just the separation. The divorce happened later on. It was miserable. I don't even know how to describe it beyond miserable. It was the most challenging thing I've ever been through. And it certainly the most challenging thing I had been through at that point. And um, I needed to escape at that point. Like after the separation, it was so intense. And it was just, I needed arm's length. And so I went and traveled for a bit. I spent about 6 months just kind of bumming around. And that perspective gave me a different perspective on what's happening when you travel. I think that's the benefit of travel, right? Like you get a new perspective on life. So I learned a bunch about myself, and I wanted to bring that into a business. I see so many men suffering through divorce, and I don't think A, we acknowledge how bad it is, and B, even talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to change that. I want to make a place where men can talk about that and grow from it.
I think that's really important. And I say that as somebody who's been through a pretty bad divorce myself. And I've got a couple friends going through it right now. I've got one of my best friends. I mean, the divorce is final, but he's dealing with all the fallout of having two kids, and she is still trying to do everything she possibly can to make his life a living hell
Hmm.
for no
I've been
reason.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to me how, and I know it goes both ways too, but we're guys and we're talking about men getting divorced. So, it's just amazing how vindictive women can get in the divorce.
I do think it goes both ways. I think you're right there. Part of what shocked me when I went through a divorce is just looking up the stats as to what happens. Almost the suicide rate is almost 10 times for men what it is to women. And to me, that indicates there's a huge, huge gap here. The men are in crisis going through a divorce and what's being done for it. And it's still the same process when you go through court. It's, take your chips, give it to her, and call it a day. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that's not fair, but that doesn't take the man into account when you do that. I'm focusing on fathers because of how important fathers are to the role in raising their kids. There are all kinds of stats around how important just having an involved father is in your kids' lives. So it's crazy talk that these courts are doing this same thing over and over and over again. They're destroying men and therefore destroying families and destroying the next generation. Like
Hmm.
it's this domino effect. And it's crazy to me. It doesn't seem like reality. It doesn't seem like the court system cares about fathers and families.
They don't. They don't. And, I won't put on my tinfoil hat completely here, but I think there's a reason for that because you're right. The statistics show that children who grow up in single mother homes are infinitely more likely to end up in prison with mental, like the violent offenders, the sex offenders, the murderers, all that in prison, like 80% or more come from single mother family.
Do you know what the,
And
sorry,
I was going
sorry.
to say, really, no, it's the interesting thing to me is, I mean, that's a pretty alarming statistic in and of itself. But when you look at the flip side of the coin, in the few cases where the men get custody and it's a single father, those rates are almost exact. There's no statistical difference between that and an intact nuclear family.
I've got a bunch of stats on my website. If you go to divorce-daddy.com, under my philosophy, there's the powerful father. Here's a couple. I'm just reading really quickly. Children with actively involved fathers are 98% more likely to graduate from high school. Boys with absent fathers are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated. Daughters of involved fathers, 75% less likely to become pregnant as teenagers. 42% less likely to use drugs and alcohol. Like it goes on and on and on. And there's one more statistic that's really important. The number one indicator of sexual abuse is a step parent.
That's alarming.
That is alarming. So, I mean, that's a crisis.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe that. And it doesn't seem like, yes, there are divorce recovery coaches, and I find what they're focused on is making money, getting laid more, and focus on your body.
Yeah.
Those are all great, but that's external validation. I want to bring it inside. Find that peace inside yourself. The rest of that stuff comes from that. Money comes from confidence. Having the body comes from confidence. Getting women comes from confidence. Like it all comes from inside. Having that peace. I think I've been fairly successful in that. If you look at the relationship I have with my kids now, and I'm not trying to sell my kids or anything like that, but they're really good kids. I never had any discipline problem, like very minor discipline problems. They're kids. They're going to get in trouble. They're off working on things they love working on. My oldest went to university for nuclear science. For Christ's sakes, like I don't even know where that came from. Nuclear science, nuclear engineering.
Yeah.
Like what is that? He's talking about biology and nuclear physics, and I'm like, I don't know where you came from. And it's not, and I know I'm talking about external validation, but that's coming from inside. That's what he wanted to do. So to me, that's really, and we're going to have a call later today and talk about investing. So I'm going to teach him, some of the stuff I've learned about investing, and he's like really keen to learn that. That's really cool. That's a cool relationship. I didn't have that relationship I still don't have that relationship with my father. That's a cool thing to have.
Yeah. No, it's good that you are still that involved with your kids' lives. It really is. It's good for you, but it's fantastic for them overall.
Exactly.
To have that in there.
And so I want to help others have this experience. You can focus on what you're losing. And I went through a miserable divorce. I lost it was the old joke. Don't get married, just buy somebody you hate a house. And that's exactly what happened. I paid the down payment, but they just went, nope, that's not your house anymore. You don't get any of the equity. You don't get anything. That's hers now. And by the way, you have a monthly payment now. What? Why do I have a monthly payment? And she tried to alienate me from my friends. And I'm not sharing this to trash her. I'm sharing this to show how miserable this divorce was. She tried to alienate me from my friends and family, took my money, took my house, took my kids from me. There's more to it. It went on and on and on. And again, it's not to trash her. It's to show that I was in the shit.
Yeah.
So it took years for me because I focused on what I was losing. I'm losing my house. I lost these friends. I lost this time with the kids. I'm losing my money. I can focus on that, or I can focus on where I'm going. And it's really, really easy to focus here, what you're losing. I imagine you went through something similar when you went through your divorce. You focused on the thing you're losing. And it's absolutely paramount that you take it from what you're losing to what you can do. All you
Right.
can do is what you can do. One of the metaphors I like to use is if you plant more flowers, there's no room for weeds to grow. So, what flowers can you plant? Travel was one of those things. When I met my wife, we both love my new wife. I don't know how to describe that. We both love travel, so we traveled as much as possible. That was one of the flowers, I planted, and as much often as we could, we got on the plane and went somewhere.
How long, if you don't mind me asking, how long was it after your divorce where you were able to get into a healthy relationship again? Like from your perspective,
I was in a
be functional.
relationship pretty quickly, but I don't know that I was healthy for a few years. We're in a really good place now. I want to make that clear. And we've been through our ups and downs, and I think it took years before we really recognized the patterns in both of us. I am, what did she said, I'm avoidant attachment, and she's, what's the opposite one, the bad one? Anyway,
Um, Codependent? I don't know. There's a lot of these
something like that.
terms.
Yeah. So we were the opposite of each other. When I got frustrated, I ran away. When she got scared, she would try to cling. So that didn't work because I was trying to run
Right.
away. She was trying to.
Yeah.
So it took years for us to get to a place where we could even talk about that. I would say like 5, 6 years,
But you did. So
but
that's,
we did.
yeah, that's the key. You know, the divorce process for guys, and once again, we're talking from guys here. I know there's a whole other side to it, and women will have a different story in many cases, but I don't know what it's like in Canada. In the US, women are the one filing for divorce 80% of the time.
Hmm.
And if they have a 4-year degree, that statistic goes over 90%.
Hmm.
So it's not the guys who are looking to get out of the marriages. 8 to 9 times out of 10, it's the woman filing for the divorce. And I think a lot of guys kind of get blindsided by that. Not everyone. I didn't. You know, I that was kind of mutual on our part. By the time it had been so miserable for 2 years, by the time we separated, I was like, ah, it was like a giant weight. I remember driving the car away from the house and I was like, oh, thank God, I feel like I can breathe again. But I had to go through 2 years of misery to get to that point where I actually left or more. But it's just rough on that perspective because when I went into the marriage, I'm sure you were the same, but it's like I'm at old school. My parents are still together after it's almost 60 years.
Hmm.
So I would get married. I was like, okay, this is it. This is for life. I am committed to this. And then, didn't work out that way.
Yeah, mine are the same way. To your point, I wonder why we're getting blindsided. Are we not attuned to what's going on in the other part of our relationship? I'm not saying happy wife, happy life. That's
No,
bullshit to me.
you have to
Oh,
be present and aware of what's going on.
exactly. And I don't think you know that, and that's why I'm focused on inside rather than the external.
Right.
I know a lot of guys talk about playing game on their running game on their wives. One guy talks about if he has an argument with his wife, he'll disappear for 24 to 48 hours. And that just seems like, why are you playing this game? Like what are you doing? Like
Yeah,
that just sounds like
that's not running game. That's just being a dumbass.
exactly.
I'm sorry. That's just not healthy.
I'm relating that because I think it's indicative of what a lot of guys think. They're up here. And when you're in your head, you tend to think things through logically. But a marriage isn't logical. And here's the other thing. I believe in balance. So if you're in here, she's going to be more in her emotions. The more in her emotions she is, the more you're going to get in your head. And that like oil and water right there.
Yeah.
The answer is get here. You can get to a place where you can, it's hard to describe this, but this is the best I think I can do at this point. I'm still struggling to communicate this. When I have a disagreement with my wife, I almost feel like I'm an observer of it. Like I'm watching what's happening and I'm watching where the trigger points are.
Hmm.
What's upsetting. And I'm not from that place, you don't blow up because it's
Right.
like, oh, you did this. I believe that you didn't do it intentionally. You give them the benefit of the doubt. That's part of it. And that caused this reaction in me. So you get curious about that. Why am I reacting to that? And often you can dig into that. And this is what I help men do is dig into those trigger points and look for what the nugget is in there. And that's how you build wisdom. So the next time you have that blow up, or the next time you're in that situation, because it won't be a blow up that the next time, but the next time you're in that situation, you can go, oh, this is what that was teaching me. Here's an example. My ex had an affair, and she was on her phone all the time. I used to get so angry when she would get on her phone because she was, clearly chatting with this guy. And it was like the most obvious affair in the world. It was just so like it was written above her head. And she was always like, no, I didn't. No, I'm not. The denial was the worst part of that situation. I went from that relationship. I mean, that was the end of that relationship. So I went to the next relationship, and she would be on her phone. And I would go, inside I was like, what are you doing on your phone? Are you talking to somebody else? Like, what's going on there? Like, what?
Of course.
But that's not healthy for the relationship, because you're bringing the past relationship with you to the next one. Yeah. And that's going to mean the end of that relationship, because you're going to be suspicious all the time.
Right. It's a fine line, isn't it? Because
It is.
you have to learn from your experiences, but you can't necessarily transfer what happened in this one all 100% onto like the next one, like your current wife. But you also have to be aware of, if red flag pops up based on your past experience, you have to be cognizant of those.
You do, but I've learned to trust myself. I've learned to trust what's here. And that tells me she's not that type of person. That's part of it too, is the type of person she is. And so it was hard for me to trust positive intent, but I think that's key to really navigating those kind of relationships. You have to trust that she is being honest and has her best intentions for you. And when you come from that place, yeah, maybe there are red flags, but I think they add up. It's not just one red flag. It's not just, is she on her phone? I think a lot of people are on their phone these days.
Yeah. That in and of itself is not necessarily a huge red flag, like a deal breaker. But you take it in all of the data, since guys are in our head all the time. You have to kind of take in all of the data you have, and based on your past experiences, you'll get a feeling for what's off.
You just described it, though. You take it into your head and then run it through this.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's not just being here. This will lead you astray. This won't.
I think that, as far as, if you understand, and you obviously do, but if guys understand that we are more logical, more linear type creatures, and that we have a certain way, that's just the way we're biologically hardwired, women are set up differently. And I think, honestly, I take a lot of responsibility for that now in my relationships. I'm the one who I was like, okay, you know what? I have to understand her. I have to analyze what's going on. It is up to me to understand why she might be feeling a certain way, why she might be reacting a way, analyze that, and then react accordingly. I take that responsibility. To me, it's incumbent upon myself to understand the dynamics of how men and women relate and kind of guide through that.
Yeah, I get that. I'm trying to think. I made a shift where I stopped analyzing, because that was just exhausting. My CPU would be running all the time. And that's just tiring. If you can, it's going to sound strange, but open to her, open to how she's feeling. Don't chase her happiness. Don't do that. That's a recipe for disaster. But open to how she's feeling and just welcome that in. Because there's information. I don't mean to get too woo-woo. We can get woo-woo. But I think in a relationship, you're sharing energy, and there's that energy exchange going on. And she's sharing her energy with you. And if you can open to what that's telling you, I think you have a stronger bond.
Yeah.
And that takes time, that takes trust. I get it. But I think experience, but I think that builds a stronger relationship.
Well, let's talk about, like, going back to the divorce itself, because I followed somewhat a similar path, because with my divorce, there was a lot of stuff going on at the same time. I lost my business, got wiped out financially, which was great. And really, in retrospect, because there was nothing she could take from me. There was nothing left by the time she tried to screw me over legally. So there's just nothing left. So I didn't have to pay her anything, really. So, fortunate for me. But, from where I was at, it took me a couple of years to really get out of this funk and this depression that I was in. And when I finally processed everything, whatever, however you want to call it, I was like, okay, so it was a lot of his identity thing. Okay, you're a husband, you're a businessman, you're all this. Now all that stripped away. You're like, okay, who am I really? And I looked at the life that I had, and I was making a killing at real estate, making all sorts of money, but I didn't really enjoy it. It was just something I could make a ton of money at.
Hmm.
And I wanted to travel, and I was always kind of frustrated that I had to be there, because real estate's one of those businesses. If I'm not there with the clients, and I'm not generating more clients, and I'm not doing this, income would stop.
Right.
So I didn't get to travel as much as I wanted to, and I certainly didn't get to go live abroad, because you got to be there to sell houses. So that realization was like, we weren't really happy anyway, and what's done is done. So now I have the opportunity to go do what I really wanted to do, which was travel and live abroad and do all those things. And I found, just through traveling, getting into a different area, different culture, new experiences, new people, that really helped my process in terms of renewing myself, I guess, after all of that. It was really key with the way I operated. It really helped.
I have two ways I want to take that. One of the best reframes, I'll share this first because I think this is quicker. But I'm relating to the part where you say it was good. It was good that I lost everything. I think the work I'm doing is geared towards those guys that haven't realized yet that it's good. So you're in that place between end of the relationship. And I think there's a fear phase, an anger phase, and a depression phase that you go through after that. I hit all those points. The way out of it for me was to recognize the frame shift I used is I get to. So I get to rebuild. And that puts it in my court. I get to build the life I really want now. Maybe up to that point, you've been living, like I think you said off the top, help them escape the matrix. That's a key point for me. But I think I was living life on these rails. You go to school, you get out, you graduate, you get a job, and you have a career now, and a mortgage, and this and that, and a car payment. And those are the rails you're on.
Yeah, you settled in. That's your life.
Yeah. Pattern interrupt, and a divorce is such a good pattern interrupt, are really key to breaking out of those rails. So if you're in that fear phase, if you're in that anger phase, if you're in that depression, look for where you get to break out of those things. That's where you're going to find that power. What is your rock bottom? Where are you building your foundation from? Find that foundation and let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I like that. That's true, though. It's a way you think about things. And like you said, I get to reinvent myself. I get to do it better this time.
Exactly. So that's why I'm starting this business. I was working in tech before this. I was making good money. I had a nice BMW. I had a nice house in the suburbs. I got laid off 3 times in 1 year. And, couldn't keep paying the bills, and that's why I started focusing on this. I had this moment of what are you going to make your life into? And this is the direction I wanted to go. So I get to rebuild. Like I get to go back and fix the glitches in my thinking and really rebuild the life I want. So it's not just divorce that can cause a pattern interrupt.
A lot of things. Divorce just tends to be a really strong one.
It is, and I've heard it's, I don't know, considered one of the top 5 failures in life. And I think that's a negative frame. I don't like the frame failure. I think it feels like one of the top 5 failures in life, but
it does at the time.
100% it does. So what are you going to turn it into? That's the challenge. When you started traveling, I'm curious, did you have a moment of wherever you go, there you are?
I've shared this story several times before, but when I sold everything, got rid of everything, donated, whatever, I put 2 boxes of suitcase and my dog in a car, and we drove from Las Vegas down to Playa. And it was literally one of the first nights I was in Playa del Carmen, and I was just walking Fifth Avenue and 10th, just trying to get a lay of the land. And it was hot out. It was August. So I was like, I'm a bar there. I stopped in to grab a beer, and I'm sitting there, and some other guy, an American, Canadian, I'm not sure, but I'm chatting with him, and he was like, "So, are you running from something, or are you searching for something?" I was like, "Well, that's an interesting question." He's like, "I've just found that everybody who moves out of the U.S., Canada, he's like, they end up down in Playa. They're either running from something or searching for something." And I was like, "Well, I don't have any legal problems, so I guess I'm searching for something." And it was that, I guess, new identity that I was reconstructing for myself after having put, so much blood, sweat, and tears into the business and the marriage and everything else. You have to kind of figure out who you are. For me, travel was a big part of that and experiencing new stuff. But yeah, I thought that question, because that was kind of my moment. I'm like, okay, well, I'm here. Here's where
Hmm.
I am. You know, thought that was an interesting question. Never saw the guy again.
You didn't need to.
No, no, just
What
food for thought.
it is, what got you out of that old mindset?
Well, it wasn't any one thing. It was a gradual thing because how old was I when I got divorced? 39 to 40, somewhere in there. And one of those things was, like you said, there's the fear and the anger, the depression and all that kind of stuff. And one of those things that was in my head, and I don't know why, I was like, man, I'm old now. Like, what's dating gonna be like? And like all this stuff. I'm like, oh man. And I was at a bar and I was talking to this just impossibly beautiful little Cuban girl. And she was like 22. And she's like, "So how old are you?" And I was just honest with her. I'm like, "Oh, whatever. She's going to run away." And I was like, "I'm, 40 or whatever it was." She looks at me and she's like, "I think you're older than my dad."
Oh,
I was like, "All right. Is that a problem?" She's like, "No, Poppy." I was like, okay, so maybe dating post divorce won't be so bad. No, I never ended up going out with her, but that was kind of a wake up call to me. Okay, all is not lost. You know, there
yeah.
are, it's not like you is lost and you're never gonna find love again. I know a lot of guys struggle. I think even I did at the time. It's like, oh man, that was the one I thought, and and then it turns out that what, you meet amazing people, you have amazing experiences, you can rebuild a life. Because I am much happier now than I
Hmm.
was doing real estate and being married to that particular individual. My girlfriend now is absolutely amazing. It's
Hmm.
peace. There's peace in that. She brings me peace. There's no drama, no bullshit. It's just, and I look back to the stuff that I put up with then. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I put up with that in terms of my relationship and everything. I'm just like, but it's all part of the learning process, I guess.
It is. It is. And bringing you peace. That's all you want, right?
What more can you ask for? Peace, support, and it's amazing knowing that I could be home or she'll get home and I'm not going to have to fight another battle. There's never going to be challenge that she instigates. Obviously we've had or things where we've had to discuss and all that kind of stuff, but there's never any unnecessary drama. And that's just night and day difference from the marriage relationship that I had, where there was always some sort of drama.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, I can see. It's written all over your face.
I don't like going back there, but yeah, this is peace. I had a discussion with a guy who said, I don't want a woman to ever challenge me. And I was like, so how's dating going? And he was like, oh, I haven't dated a girl in years for more than like 2 weeks. So this is just a tiny nuance to what you said. I do want my wife to challenge me, but in a conscious way. So
Yeah,
push me to be better, but not challenge me in some bullshit like you didn't take the garbage out. Go away. I don't care. I'm not.
yeah. Uh,
Just leave me
yeah, I
alone.
don't need you nagging at me.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like you said, challenging you is a form of support,
100%.
because that's going to what drives us as guys. Sometimes we need a little bit of a push to be better. And having that, having a strong, supportive woman who's not bringing you drama and gives you that little push every once in a while is invaluable.
We all have our blind spots, and
Mm,
sometimes she notices them
yeah.
and says, you know, you can do better with this. I recorded a video the other day and I sent it to her. I said, what do you think of this? And she was like, your shirt's stained. She was like, you can do better
Yep.
than that. I was like, all right, all right.
Yep. But she's right. And
She is right.
we'll let stuff like that slip. So yeah, that I appreciate a woman. Like you said, there's challenge in the correct way.
Exactly. The way I try to think of it is I look for wisdom. And when I travel, I try to look for wisdom wherever I can get it. One of the ones I've found is in the yin and yang, black and white, challenge and support. If you go seeking support, you will attract challenge. If you go looking for challenge, you will attract support. If you challenge
Funny that.
yourself, you're going to attract that support. So, and the further into a relationship you get, the stronger your bond is to your partner. So the more you challenge each other, the more support you're going to attract. So
That makes sense.
it does. So that's where I'm
Makes
coming
sense.
from that. So I appreciate the proper kind of challenge.
Yeah. The challenge that spurs me to be a better man.
Yeah,
That's the kind.
that's the kind.
So, so how do you tie in when you're talking to your clients and working through divorce? Is travel something that becomes part of what you recommend, or is that just a personal thing that you use to kind of get over, or is that just individual to each person that you talk to?
Well, I think it's individual. I think there's a shocking number of people who aren't into travel. They're like, I just want to stay home. I'm like,
Yeah.
we have nothing in common here.
It's hard for me to imagine that, but yeah, there are
There are.
probably more than that are addicted to travel.
In the new year, this is one of the things I'm working on is setting up some retreats, probably in this area where we will challenge the shit out of each other. And I don't know quite what the form of that's going to take. It might involve psychedelics. I'm not sure, but certainly some boxing and some of that emotional work, learning to get really centered and challenging yourself through. And I'll put them through the ringer, both emotionally and physically with some boxing.
That's I mean, I fought Muay Thai a long time, so that's not strange to me. But I think it's good for guys if they have not experienced that to experience that because that opens your eyes to a lot of things.
One of the suggestions I have, one of the rituals I take every day is some time being present. And this will really help if you're in that depression, anger, fear phase. You're depressed because you're worried about the past. You're angry because you're worried about what's going to happen or something's happened to you. Past is over with. Future hasn't happened yet. Those times don't matter. Get right now. And there's nothing better than getting into the present moment than having somebody trying to punch you in the face.
Yep. You want to find out what you're made of and you want to be completely present, that's a great way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a great way to go about it, especially most guys have no idea. They're either just terrified of it or they have this image in their head that, oh, I'll just see red and body will drop.
Nope.
Neither of those things are probably true. You're in for a, yeah, what is it? Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a game plan until you get punched in the mouth.
But you do, once you've been punched a couple times, you carry yourself differently.
And for me, my philosophy regarding, masculinity and stuff like that, I think every single man should have a degree of training in some sort of, whether it's jujitsu, boxing, Muay Thai, but a functional martial art. Not that I'm talking crap about kung fu and all that, but it's more of a dance to me,
Mm-hmm.
but like a functional martial art that will serve you in a real situation. Because if you know what it's like to be punched and you have training, that gives you a level of confidence that cannot be duplicated. It really
100%.
does. And the psychedelics too, that is for the right people, that can be a really transformative experience.
Yep.
Have you experimented with any?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
First time I did it was about 2 months after I separated. I was in a big house alone in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, all right, let's do this. I met God that night.
Yep.
Yeah, it's one of the offerings I'm going to be going forward with in the new year at some point. And I've been dying to try ayahuasca, and I finally tried it and I know it's not quite the same as doing it in the Amazon jungle, but I did it near Playa.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, those are actually going to be my next question, was if you'd gone the ayahuasca route.
yeah. Um, yeah, we were in the jungle and we're laying on the ground and I'm looking up at the canopy, the leaves. Actually, sorry, let me back up. I'm a big guy, and I said to the shaman, I have a high tolerance, and he said, okay, let's go for it. And he poured me like double the dose of everybody else. So I chugged it and I went and laid down and I must have been there an hour. Nothing, just nothing. And I'm looking around. Everybody else is like, my wife's next to me. She's like gone. She's in, the next dimension. The guy next to me, he's in this cocoon and he's clearly gone. So I get up and I go back to him. Sorry, there was this voice in the back of my head that said, be patient. Just relax. Be patient. And I was like, no, no, I'm not going to be patient. So I got up, went up to the shaman. He said, okay, let's go again. He poured me the same dose. And this is, again,
So now you're in quadruple.
quadruple. So I took it. Within 5 minutes, a bunch of other people had thrown up and they warned you that people were going to throw up.
Yeah.
You're going to purge as part of this. Within 5 minutes, I was in space, but then I had to purge. And this voice came back and it was more stern and it said, I told you to be patient. So that was Mother Ayahuasca speaking to me. So then I was in the trip. I laid back down, so I'm under the canopy and there's leaves above me. And you know what angry birds look like? Every leaf was an angry bird and all of them were staring at me. And I felt very on the spot. And they were all like
in a spotlight type.
And they were all like, I know what you've done, you piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. And I lived with that for about probably an hour and a half. I don't even know. Time doesn't matter when you're in that.
Could have been 30 seconds.
Could have been 30 seconds. And then I went, hang on. This isn't my failing. You were responsible for that. And, I have my part, but that's not me. And I went through all these things. And then as soon as I put that boundary up, that part of the trip disappeared and it went on to the next part. So what I took from that was shame doesn't live within you. Shame is appointed to you. We take it on, but we don't have to internalize it. So I clearly internalized that shame. And then, I'm still, even 6 months later, I'm still like, oh yeah, that's that. And that's that. That's not mine. Get that out of here. But I'm still feeling the effects even now.
And how long ago was that?
That was in March.
Okay.
Have you ever tried it?
Not ayahuasca. I've done a lot of different other ones. I actually did a ceremony in Playa, but it wasn't ayahuasca, it was San Pedro. So you got ayahuasca is the grandmother, and then San Pedro is like the grandfather. Yeah. But unfortunately, I was with the wrong shaman because I'm also a pretty big guy. I'm like 6'3", and I have a lot of experience with mushrooms and peyote and acid and all, whatever. So we all drank our tea, and after a period of time, like an hour, everybody crying, throwing up, everybody's having their experience, and I'm like, okay. So I went to the interpreter and I said, hey, look, I don't feel anything. I know should have kicked in by now. I do have experience with this. I'm not a little bit of a psychonaut. I'm not an amateur, and I'm also a pretty big guy. So I think some more would be in order. The shaman was like, no, just wait. So I waited like another half an hour, absolutely nothing, and I went back. She's like, no. See, you have to realize that this is not like a club. This is not a party experience. We're trying to go inward. So I'm like, I am here for the spiritual aspect of it. My party days are decades behind me.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe they just looked at me as like, okay, I'm an American in Playa. Maybe I've got a certain look. They just assumed I was like looking for I'm out in the cenote in the middle of nowhere. I'm not here for the nightclub experience,
Yeah.
She just, and it was fairly expensive and she didn't want to give up anymore. So to me, it was a little bit of a kind of a scam, a little bit to me. So I just left. They're like, oh, you can't go. I'm like, yes, I can. So jumped in my car and went home, and yeah, like I've gotten more effects off a microdose of mushrooms.
That's unfortunate that you had that.
Yeah, but it is what it is. But yeah, I have a friend that does healing ceremonies and stuff in Sedona using mushrooms and things like that. It's a very guided experience. It's a very he wouldn't go so far as to call himself a shaman, and neither would I, but he's very experienced and he's very, spiritual, and, he helps people through the experience and helps them, clear whatever you need to clear. A lot of people, especially if it's like their first time or something like that, they find it's a really transformative experience.
100%.
but especially from healing from things like divorce or whatever. One of the things with psychedelics, they get kind of a bad rap. And I think classifying them as, drugs is inane and stupid because, they look at you when you look at clinical depression and things like that. They're finally starting to loosen up on these things, and they've done studies at some colleges in the U.S. where one mushroom trip, something like 3.5 grams, and it will alleviate the symptoms of clinical depression for 3 months or more.
Lifetime for some people.
Yeah, sometimes it's a lifetime, but it's absolutely amazing. And like I said, I don't. It's not a party thing for me. It's a self-introspection thing for me. But I've seen such amazing things. Like even my girlfriend, and I don't think she'll mind me sharing the story, but she took mushrooms for the first time with me. And there's a point where she was just crying uncontrollably. And I was just holding her. I was like, everything okay? And she was looking at me. She's like, everything is beautiful. And she got to have a conversation with her grandmother and her great grandmother, a deep, intimate conversation. And then, bear in mind, they passed a while ago.
Hmm.
And some unresolved stuff that she had, but she came out of that a completely different person. There's so much stuff that she was able to resolve that she had with her, you know, kind of the women lineage, her mom, her grandma, her great grandma, and just a beautiful, beautiful experience. So I can see where that would be something in the right setting, of course, have something to help people. And if you can travel and do it to someplace in Playa or the Amazon,
Why
even
wouldn't you?
better,
Why
even
wouldn't you?
better, even
And
better.
I've had so many experiences like that that I can't. I completely hear what you're saying about a beautiful experience like that, and it's wonderful. And I think of it more as medicine. And you don't want to, when you think of it as medicine, you don't abuse it. Sorry, I thought of another experience. Real quick story. So my wife had a wonderful ayahuasca experience when, during that was the first time for both of us. She had a wonderful time. She just said she felt great through the whole thing.
Hmm.
Except this voice came to her and said, "Go get your left ovary checked out." And then she was like, "Yeah, okay, take me back to the happy place. I'm having a great time here." And it wasn't not like a party, but just
Yeah.
this is how good life can feel. That's what I mean by that. And then the voice said again, "No, go get it checked out." And then it turned down the volume on the good feeling. And she went, "Okay, I'll go get it checked out." And then one more time it said, "I'm going to turn this good feeling off if you don't really do it." So, about a month after that, she went to the doctor and found a growth on her left ovary and had to have it removed. The other one was fine.
You know, I've heard a lot of stories like that as well. If you look at every single ancient culture, whether it's Native Americans, Egyptian, you look in the Amazon, ayahuasca in particular, obviously you know how it's made. You have the vine and the leaf, and they have to be mixed together. There are literally millions of plant species in the Amazon. How did they find the two that had to be put together and boiled at a certain thing? It's absolutely fascinating to me. But when you look at ancient civilizations who are much more in touch with nature, spirituality, all of these things, which we are disconnected from in a big way in modern society, every single one of them used plant medicine.
Why are we having so many mental health issues these days? It's a mystery to me.
Yeah,
We have
but it's
we don't
something,
have rituals. We just prescribe medication.
yeah, exactly. And I think, I'm glad that some of the stigma is finally passing on some of that stuff and it's getting a chance to be researched and really taken a look at as a serious thing instead of just being stigmatized as like a drug, you know? Because classifying that as something like heroin or cocaine is just the stupidest thing in the world to me.
Not even close. You can't
It,
be
it
addicted to mushrooms. It's physically
no,
impossible. You don't want to
no.
be addicted to mushrooms. That takes you to scary places.
Yeah, it can be scary. It can be
Yeah.
scary, but it can be ultimately there's always something you can learn.
Well, 100%. The bad trips are the best ones. That's what I mean by that. I might be built differently, but I look for those kinds of challenges these days.
I was going to
I
say
understand
challenge.
many people don't, but
I think we
and
need
if you
to.
haven't read the, sorry, I'm
Go
interrupting.
ahead.
If you haven't read the book, I'd like to float How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. He's a, I think he came from it could be like journalistic background, And he looks at a bunch of different types of psychedelic experiences, and I'm pretty sure Bufo is one of them. And he digs into, where it comes from. And apparently we shouldn't be doing it. It should be remain. It, it. I only read it after, so I didn't know. But it is an endangered toad, I believe, and so we should save it for the indigenous people. But he does look at in the book. He argues in favor of psychedelics.
I haven't read that. I'll check it out though. I did, years and years ago when I was a very young man, I read like The Doors of Perception by Terence McKenna
Hmm.
and other works like that. And that kind of opened my eyes to what some of the aspects of psychedelics could be or plant medicine, as opposed to, what you told all through high school.
It's not going to make you. Well, it probably isn't going to make you jump off the roof of a building.
I mean, I suppose it depends on your location and how much you take. But yeah, like that's the thing, it's always that you get told something over and over and over again, and then when you experience it, it's nothing like that. There's that disconnection. I'm like, okay, am I being lied to? Yeah. In many cases, that's exactly what's happening. And then you start going down the rabbit hole of why is the government so against this stuff? Alcohol is far more damaging
100%.
in every single aspect, but the government wants to put you in prison for a plan. But not the time or place to
It's
go
not
down that particular
profitable.
rabbit hole. No,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
profitable, and the last thing they want is an enlightened society.
Ask too many tough questions.
Yeah, don't question the narrative. So, all right. Well, any last words, like somebody who might be listening to this going through a divorce or something difficult, and they're looking at traveling as a way to help deal with whatever they're dealing with. What would your advice be?
If you're going through it, I really recommend getting some arm's length. And for me, it was travel, like getting a different perspective. For me, it was travel. I could look back and look at the things that were important. And when I had that perspective, it wasn't the things. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the relationship with my kids. It was the life I was building moving forward. That's what was important. So when I went back after that 6 months, I prioritized the relationship with my kids and my new relationship, and that's where I built from.
That's a great place to start. I know from personal experience that traveling gave me a different perspective on everything because when you're in that little bubble, everything in that little bubble is so important.
Hmm.
Your credit score, your income, your house you live in, the car you, all this stuff, especially in Vegas, which is a very superficial town.
Hmm.
And then when you get out of that and you're like, well, none of that shit was important anyway. It's
There's what
really
credit score.
not. It's fun. It's fun. Like I loved my cars. I love my big house, but I mean, those are not the things that have any true meaning in life.
No. Look up the five biggest regrets of the dying.
Yeah.
And it's always about relationships.
Yeah. It's a relationships and experiences.
And I love the cartoons. Yeah, relationships and experiences. I love the cartoons. They've got somebody on their deathbed. I wish I created more stockholder value.
Damn, I wish I'd stayed at the office longer. No,
Yeah,
nobody says
yeah.
that.
Nobody
Nobody
says
says
that.
that. They wish they had spent more time with their kids. They wish they had spent more time with their spouse, their loved ones, their friends. They wish they had experienced more because this life in this world has so much to offer. So many fantastic experiences.
Take the pattern interrupt, divorce, loss of your job, whatever it might be. Look at what the pattern interrupt is, and then go dig in. Look at how you can rebuild your life. Look at what it's telling you, first of all, and then how you can grow from it. Pattern interrupt is going to get you off those rails we were talking about earlier. I don't want to be in the
100%.
suburbs anymore.
No interest in it. No interest in it. Well, where can people get a hold of you if somebody's looking for maybe some help if they're going through a divorce or dealing with that kind of stuff? Where can they find you? I'm gonna put your links and everything in there, but
I'm on Instagram at Rebuild with Divorce Daddy, divorce-daddy.com. That has all my links, and I've got a starter kit. So if you're in that anger, depression, fear phase, that'll get you started.
all right, sounds good. Reach out to him, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Had a great time.